If you had to die to understand why you're alive, would you accept that? If everything you once believed mattered, your job, your reputation, your identity, even your fears, suddenly dissolved in a single breathless moment, would you have the courage to hear the answer that comes from the other side of death? This isn't a fantasy, and it wasn't a dream. This is the real journey of my life, Emily Thorne. I once believed I was preparing to welcome a little angel into the world, but instead, I was suddenly taken to meet the real ones. The day I went into labor was filled with sunlight. Everything seemed perfect. My husband held my hand tightly. The doctors smiled with reassurance. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with love, because the life growing inside me was finally about to meet the sun. But what I didn't know was that for my child to see that light, I would have to pass through darkness. The pain began like small waves. Then it surged into a storm. I heard the doctor shout that the baby's heartbeat was dropping. I needed an emergency C-section. Everything became a blur. Needles, white curtains, surgical lights, and then nothing. No feeling, no fear, no pain, just complete stillness. And in that silence, something ancient began to awaken in me. A question. A voice without words rose in my mind. Do you want to know the truth? I didn't know who was asking, but my soul answered instantly, yes. And the moment I said yes silently, I was no longer Emily. I was no longer a mother-to-be, no longer a wife, a daughter, or any label I had ever given myself. I was entering something far greater, invisible, but more real than anything I'd ever touched. I didn't know I was dying, but I knew I was about to discover what I'd been searching for my entire life. I thought I had lost everything, but it turns out that was just the beginning, the moment I finally saw myself for the very first time. And what I saw next would forever change the way you understand life. No body, no weight, no heartbeat. And yet, I still was a conscious presence, clear and aware, watching myself from somewhere beyond. I saw my body lying motionless on the operating table. Everything unfolded like a slow-motion film. The sterile glow of surgical lights, doctors moving urgently, the erratic beeping of the monitor. A nurse scrambled to reposition the table. Someone shouted, "Her heart just stopped." But I didn't panic. On the contrary, I felt a strange peace, as if I had just slipped out of a straitjacket and was breathing for the first time, not with lungs, but with my soul. I hovered above the scene, beyond time, beyond place. I tried to look at my hands, but I had no hands. I had no form. I was pure awareness. And in that nothingness, I felt more whole than I ever had with a body. There was no fear, no identity, no thoughts, only stillness, clarity, presence. Then I heard, or rather felt, a sound, not with my ears, but with some deep and sacred part of my being. A frequency, a gentle stream like water flowing through a summer night, whispered into me, "You are not the body. You never were. You are light, wrapped in form, here to remember what you've forgotten." I didn't understand, but I didn't resist. A soft pull guided me farther from the operating room, through the ceiling, through layers of shimmering space. I passed through darkness, but it didn't frighten me. I entered a realm with no walls, no sky, only light. Light like mist, light like a lullaby, light like memory. Memories I didn't know I had, now returning like long-lost pieces of me. I knew this wasn't a dream. In dreams, you don't feel truth so deeply that it no longer needs proving. Here, I didn't need to believe anything. I only needed to remember. And what I was about to remember wouldn't just change me. It could change you. I was no longer Emily Thorne, But what I was about to witness from this nameless realm would answer the greatest question humanity has ever asked. Why are we alive? I was brought into a place that human language could never describe. There was no ground, no sky, yet somehow there was everything. No one stood beside me, yet I felt no loneliness. No voice spoke out loud, yet every question inside me began to melt away like wax meeting fire, making room for something deeper, a feeling more vivid than anything I had ever known. A kind of love that didn't come from anyone, but was the very space I now existed in. It didn't call me by name. It didn't require me to prove anything. It simply knew me. Every quiet thought I'd ever had, every hidden tear, every mistake, every moment of forgiveness. This light saw it all and embraced it. No judgment, no rejection, just love. And then, like a stream flowing into memory, I began to see, not with eyes, but with the core of my soul. Truth so simple it broke me open. We don't come to Earth to succeed, not to become famous, not to be perfect. We come to learn how to love ourselves when we fail, to love others even when they hurt us, to love life even when it falls apart. And that kind of love the kind without condition, without expectation, not always soft or easy, is the hardest lesson. But it is also the only reason we return to this world again and again. I saw my life again, like a film played in reverse. All the little moments I'd forgotten, the look in my mother's eyes when I was 7, the lie I told out of fear, the friend I hurt without realizing. They didn't appear to condemn me, but to help me understand, to show me that in every one of those choices, I was learning to love by colliding with what I didn't yet know. Part of me wanted to cry, but there were no tears, because a soul doesn't need tears to release, it only needs to remember. And I was remembering that I'd once known this, that I had chosen to forget, so I could learn again, that I wasn't just a mother on the edge of death, but a soul in school, learning through the torn pages of my human story. I once thought the greatest question was, why do bad things happen to good people? But now I understand. The better question is, can you keep loving even when it hurts? I thought my lesson was over, but it wasn't. Before I returned, I had to pass through one more place, a place without light, and it was there that I would come to understand the other half of love, the part most people are too afraid to see. I thought I had reached the peak of understanding. I believed the light was the reward at the end of the journey, but I was wrong. Without warning, that radiant realm was torn open by a wave of heavy vibration. There was no sound, yet it felt like the muffled cries of 1,000 souls echoed across an invisible sky. I wasn't falling. I wasn't being dragged. I simply felt myself slipping into a dense, cold mist, as if every ounce of energy in me was slowly being drained. In that place, I couldn't see. I could only feel. I felt the presence of beings without form, without words, but carrying the weight of ancient pain, anger, and sorrow. They didn't touch me, but they were undeniably there. Not demons in the traditional sense, but fragments of memory, unhealed energy, the discarded remnants of emotion that had built up over time. It was as if I were walking through the emotional graveyard of humanity itself. And I began to feel fear. Not fear of being harmed, but fear of the truth. A part of me knew I had contributed to this darkness. Through every moment I rejected myself, every time I judged another, every time I chose numbness, selfishness, or wounded others without seeking healing. None of that disappeared. It had come here, becoming shadow, becoming chill, becoming the bone-deep silence that now surrounded my soul. I wanted to flee. Every part of me wanted out. But then something strange happened. I don't know why, but I did the one thing I hadn't done yet. I forgave. Not with words, but with a quiet acceptance. I acknowledged that I had been afraid. I had made mistakes. I had been small. And I loved that smallness. I sent that love into the darkness like a candle lit in a room with no windows. And something miraculous occurred. The darkness pulled back. It didn't vanish. It simply stepped aside. As if, for the first time, it had been seen. As if it didn't need to be defeated or destroyed, only held in love. I realized then, light isn't stronger than darkness because it's brighter. It's stronger because it doesn't have to fight. Light simply shows up, and in its presence, darkness loses its reason to exist. The lesson wasn't found in the light. It was in bringing the light where no one believed light could go. I thought my journey was over, but the other side had one more thing for me, a choice, a chance, and one final question that would change the course of my entire life. I began to feel myself being lifted, as if my entire being, purified by both light and darkness, was becoming lighter, more refined, and more whole than ever before. A part of me thought, this must be the end. I had crossed the threshold between life and death and returned reborn in awareness. I had seen love, forgiveness, and truth. I had remembered who I truly was. So what else could there be? But then, like a gate opening without a sound, I stood before a place that cannot truly be a place. It had no shape, no form, but I knew with absolute clarity that it was a crossroads, a threshold, a decision. There, I felt a presence, not a person, not God in any religious image, but a vast consciousness, as deep as the ocean and as tender as a mother's breath as she cradles her child. It didn't ask me anything, but I knew I had to answer. A question rose gently from within my soul. Now that you understand, will you return? And live what you now know. I had thought the hardest choice would be between life and death, but it wasn't. The hardest choice was between perfect peace and returning to a world of chaos, pain, responsibility, and limitation, just to live a human life again. I saw my child, the one I hadn't held yet. I saw my husband, his eyes frantic in the emergency room. I saw my mother praying in the hospital hallway. I knew that if I didn't return, they would survive. They would grieve. They would eventually accept. But I also knew that if I did return, I would not be the same Emily. I would carry this memory, this love, these lessons, and I would live differently, softer, truer, braver. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew this. True love doesn't choose the easy path. It chooses the right one. And I chose to return. Not for myself, but because the light within me was now strong enough to guide not just my steps, but the steps of those still wandering in the dark. The moment I chose, there was no thunder, no lightning, just a whisper, deep and soft, echoing in the center of my soul. Then, bring that light back. And then I fell, fast, deep, cold, heavy. My body welcomed me back like a box too small for heaven, painful, suffocating. But my heart beat again. My eyes opened, and the very first sound I heard was my baby's cry. I had returned, but the world was no longer the same. I saw everything through different eyes, and the real journey had only just begun. I woke up in a silent white room. The first sound I heard wasn't the beeping of machines or the voice of a doctor. It was something much smaller, yet it rang through my soul. It was my baby's cry. Thin as a thread, fragile as breath, but it pulled me back from that invisible edge between worlds. I knew then I had returned, and I was no longer the same. My body was weak, my head was spinning, every breath felt like a small knife. But deep inside me, the light hadn't gone out. A whisper from that part of me that had crossed into the nameless realm was still saying, "Don't forget." And I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't forget. I couldn't live the old way anymore. I couldn't chase the meaningless, worry about things that didn't matter, or carry silent anger in my heart. Not anymore. Because I had seen what few ever see. I had heard what most will never hear. And I now knew love isn't a choice. It's who we are. I didn't tell anyone, not because I feared they wouldn't believe me, but because I understood what is truly sacred doesn't need to be proven. I didn't come back to preach or to be famous or to wear the badge of someone who died and came back. I returned to live fully, honestly, to live as someone grateful for every breath, to live as someone who believes in the light within others, even if they don't see it yet, to live as someone who has stood in the presence of unconditional love and can never turn away from it. I care for my child with the heart of a mother, yes, but also with the awareness that every hug, every diaper change, every kiss on his forehead is more than a task. It's a soul assignment. I am not just a mom. I am a vessel bringing love into this world. Every tender gesture is a message to that small heart. You are here for a reason, and so am I. I'm no longer afraid of death. I've seen that it isn't the end. It's a door. But I don't wish to reach it early either, because I chose to return. And as long as there's breath in me, I will use it to love. Do you remember the question I asked at the beginning of this video? If you had to die to discover why you're alive, would you accept it? For me, there's no need to ask anymore. I already know. I live to love, and if you're watching this video, so do you. Don't wait until everything fades to realize you've always had the light within you. All you need to do is remember.